And now a hearing on Ebonics in education. The Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education today heard the views of several witnesses about the teaching of Black English as a separate language. Among the witnesses, the originator of the term Ebonics, Robert Williams of Washington University in St. Louis, and representatives of the Oakland School District, where it has been recognized as a separate language. Senator Arlen Specter chairs this 2-hour hearing.
The hearing of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education will now proceed. This morning's hearing, in our capacity as Appropriating Subcommittee for the Department of Education, relates to the subject of Ebonics, which is a term derived from ebony, black, and phonic sound, coined in 1973 by Dr. Robert Williams, who will be testifying at today's hearing, and refers to an African-American speech pattern where linguistic experts have long debated whether Ebonics constitutes a dialect, a language, or vernacular speech. There has been considerable discussion, really controversy, and concerns as to whether Ebonics is a separate language and as such undesirable, or whether it is a teaching skill and a bridge for some to perfect and learn language skills. There is a very considerable federal appropriations involvement because of very substantial federal funds which are available on education on related matters. Illustratively, Title I, Education for the Disadvantaged, provides funding of up to $7.7 billion, some of which could conceivably be used in this line. The Bilingual Education Program for Limited English Proficient Students has funding of $156.7 million. The Office of Education Research, which studies and evaluates innovative educational techniques, has a funding of $598.4 million. And the School Improvement Program, which addresses the particular needs of each school district and innovative methods of learning, has funding of $1.426 billion. Representative Peter King in the House of Representatives has introduced a resolution, HRES 28, expressing the sense of the House that Ebonics should not have federal funding. The current controversy arose on December 18, 1996, when the Board of Education of the Oakland Unified School District unanimously approved a resolution to devise a program to, quote, improve the English language skill of African American students, close quote. The resolution generated controversy around three issues. First, whether Ebonics is a language or a dialect of English. Second, whether federal funds earmarked for bilingual education should be made available for Ebonics-based program. And third, whether Ebonics was to be taught in classes. The board further stated that they, quote, approved a policy affirming standard American English language development for all students, close quote, and further that, quote, language development for African American students, who comprise 53% of the students in the Oakland schools, will be enhanced with the recognition and understanding of the language structures unique to African American students, close quote. When this policy generated a considerable amount of concern, the board at Oakland revised its resolution on January 15th, and the new version removed the statement that African American students should be taught in their native language of Ebonics, and instead the emphasis to be on the implementation of, quote, a program featuring African language systems, principles to move students from language patterns they bring to school to English proficiency. The Secretary of Education, Richard Riley, issued a statement on December 24th, 1996 as follows, quote, elevating black English to the status of a language is not our way to raise standards of achievement in our schools for our students. It has been determined by the United States Department of Education and the Clinton administration that the use of federal bilingual educational funds for what has been called black English or Ebonics is not permitted. The administration's policy is that Ebonics is a non-standard form of English and not a formal language. The issue generated one very important lawsuit back in 1979 when in Ann Arbor, Michigan, a group of African-American mothers sued the local school board in the federal courts for failing to recognize that their elementary school-age children used, quote, black vernacular, thus denying them equal educational opportunity. And the federal court found in their favor, and without ordering any specific remedy, said that there ought to be something done about that process. In approaching this subject, I think it's important to note the emotional level on the matter generally. I relate to that very directly, recalling Yiddish being spoken in my house when I was a youngster, both of my parents being immigrants. And it was spoken a lot more when my brother was growing up. He was 10 years older than I, because he knew a lot more Yiddish than I did. And I can recall the difference of my father's accent, and it was different. And in our melting pot society, we all like to fit in and be similar, not stick out or be unusual, but at the same time, we all have pride in our own backgrounds, a great deal of ethnic pride, so it is a complex issue. And there is no doubt about the fact that education is the, if not the highest priority in our society today, it is a priority second to none. And it is a matter for state and local control beyond any question. And the federal education budget at $28 billion is in the 5 to 6% range of the total education budget. But we do have a considerable sum of money. The programs that I itemized total up to approximately $10 billion, which could touch on this subject. And we want to be sure that all Americans have the best educational opportunity possible to present themselves in the best light in the very, very highly competitive society we have, competing with other Americans and in a world competition, competing with other countries. So it is a matter of very considerable importance. We have a very balanced witness list. After the hearing was announced, we had requests from many, many more people to testify, and we will have another hearing or hearings depending upon what today's hearing discloses and what the interest is. And yesterday afternoon, I received word from Congresswoman Waters about her interest in testifying, and she is the chairperson of the Black Caucus, and we have rearranged the schedule. She and I had a lengthy discussion yesterday. She said she could boil it down into 5 minutes. That's quite a challenge, but we do welcome her here, and I'd like to yield now to my distinguished colleague, Senator Fairclough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for holding the hearing, and I thank you for letting me join you this morning. I have just a very brief statement and thought on it, and I did want to express it this morning. The issue, Mr. Chairman, has received a lot of attention all over the United States, particularly since the Oakland School Board announced the program. And I simply want to say that I think Ebonics is absurd. This is a political correctness that simply has gone out of control. As Reverend Jesse Jackson said, it was teaching down to people, and that's the last thing we need to be doing. Now, I'm very much aware that teaching children in schools in the inner cities and in poor neighborhoods all over the country, rural or inner city, has never been easy, and it never will be. But rather than trying to lower the academic standards, we should try some of the old-fashioned remedies that I think would still work. Nobody should be passed from grade to grade unless they can master the basic 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and I think we've left that. I think we need greater teacher control in the classroom. We should allow the teachers to discipline the children. That did work at one time, and I don't mean physical punishment, but they should have the right to discipline the children, to expel troublemakers immediately. We should try school uniforms to raise the self-esteem of the students, so families don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on clothes for school children. These ideas have worked. They worked long ago, and I think they produced a generation of people who had the basic reading and writing skills all over the nation, cities and rural areas. I simply don't think we need to go searching for a new form of English to solve the problems of the schools. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me be here.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Faircloth. We now turn to our first witness, the Honorable Maxine Waters, U.S. Congresswoman and Chairperson of the Black Caucus. Welcome, Congresswoman Waters, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm extremely appreciative for the fact that you rearranged this hearing somewhat today to allow me to come over and share my comments with you. And I know that you were bombarded with requests by many people to come and speak. And the fact that you have allowed me to do this is indeed very much appreciated. I have a prepared statement, and perhaps I will have an opportunity to go through some of the points of it, but I cannot start where I thought I would start because I want to be a part of setting the record straight, and I want to do that in a way that will help to educate and instruct so that we will not have members of Congress and others who are policymakers continuing to mischaracterize what has been attempted by the Oakland School District and to give new definitions to words that have been used in an effort to help our children learn standard English. I do not understand when it is said Ebonics is absurd. I think it is somewhat misleading. It is not important to focus on words that attempt to describe the problem, but what is very much important is that we understand the issue. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Chairman and members, too many African-American children have been entering school year in and year out speaking different language patterns, something other than standard English. It persists. And when this happens, it obstructs their ability to learn in ways that teachers would have them learn. They really can't learn the sciences and math and other subjects that are being taught because they are not proficient in the English language. We should not continue to pretend that this situation does not exist. It does exist. The different language patterns are real. Children continue to come to school day in and day out with these different language patterns, and it's a problem. We should commend the Oakland School District for finally saying to everybody, let's recognize that this is happening. No matter what caused it, no matter why it has happened. There are those who will attempt to explain it and talk about the roots of it, but the fact of the matter is we have children with different language patterns. Not only does it get in the way of their ability to learn oftentimes, if they continue with these language patterns as they enter the world of work, people won't listen to what they're saying. They will only listen to the fact that they sound different. Oftentimes, people are said to have said they don't understand what is being said by many of the folks who are using these different language patterns. And so the Oakland School District adopted a resolution. And this resolution basically said, we're going to recognize that there are these language patterns and we're going to do something about it. We want all of our students to speak standard English. And we're going to have to teach our teachers and involve ourselves in the community in ways that will help everybody not only to recognize that these language patterns exist, but we must all work together to correct them so that in the final analysis, the students will speak standard English. So if we're clear about what is being attempted here, we will stop the misdefinitions and the incorrect descriptions about what is being attempted. Nobody is saying we want to change English, we want to teach black English. Nobody is saying that. What we're saying is, and what they said is, we want to recognize that it is a fact of life. What can we do about it? How can we help students learn standard English? That's the goal. And so let's not talk about Ebonics being absurd or ridiculous. The fact of the matter is, I think we all want the same thing. We want our students to speak standard English. So again, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to appear today. Reiterating several weeks ago, the Oakland Board of Education passed a resolution affirming its goal to teach standard American English to all of its students, including its African American students. It adopted a strategy which recognizes that many African American students use different language patterns. After years of trying to teach children with little or no experience using standard English, Oakland courageously faced directly that a problem that it is, and many other school districts across the country face in teaching its students. Millions of students enter school each year with a language structure unique to many African Americans. Whether we like it or not, this is the reality. What the Oakland School Board has done is to acknowledge this and adopt a strategy for teachers and parents that will enhance their ability to achieve the goal of teaching proficient standard English to every one of its students. For this, Oakland should be commended. Often misunderstood, this action was a bold step based on months of research and experience from many different school districts, community involvement, and yes, determination. Let us not allow the debate over words, whether it is Ebonics, Pan-African communication behavior, or any other description, to obscure the fundamental point of the Oakland School Board's action. It does not matter what we call the language or dialect of our children. What matters is how we can teach them standard English. School districts around the country have been facing the problem of young children entering the classroom year after year without a basic understanding of standard English. Against the persistence of this problem, many jurisdictions have employed language development programs like that which Oakland has just adopted system-wide that have shown great promise. We have an educational crisis in many quarters of America. According to the California State Department of Education, African American students have a dropout rate of 7.6% compared to 2.7% for whites. In the Oakland Unified School District, African American students have an average GPA of 1.8, the lowest of any racial or ethnic group. The poor academic achievement level of African American children in Oakland, and indeed in many American communities, requires parents, educators, and policymakers to address this reality in a forthright manner. The status quo is not working. Many linguists have stated that Oakland's decision is credible, it is rational, and a potentially effective way to improve the academic standard of its students. At a conference in Chicago, Illinois this month, the Linguistic Society of America concluded that the Oakland School Board's decision is linguistically sound and a proper teaching method. These conclusions underscore the basic point of this entire discussion. Whatever this language starting point, we need to help children bridge the gap between the language patterns they know and standard English. We must find new ways to help these young men and women achieve their full potential. There is no simple task. This is no simple task, and it will require the best creative minds. We must be open to new alternatives for bringing all of our children into the educational and professional mainstream. Instead of ignoring language structures that have prevented our children from learning math, science, communications, and other subjects which enhance their future prospects, the Oakland School District has confronted the challenge head-on. The Oakland Unified School District is not the first, nor will it be the last, to utilize the most primary teaching tool of all: take children where they are and prepare them for the future. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I hope you will agree that the education of our children is one of, if not the top priority. If we fail to prepare our children for the future, we will reap the whirlwind of their frustrated dreams. We must understand and incorporate the full context of the educational crisis in America to fully appreciate the recent actions of the Oakland School Board, as well as their strength and resolve. I believe with this perspective, we can all move forward together, striving to attain the goal of equal educational opportunities for all American children. I thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to share my views, and I hope that following the information you will receive today, you will have a better understanding of what is being done and what was said, and not allow the media hype to guide and direct the actions of the Senate or the Congress or policymakers of our nation.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman Waters. The object is to provide the best possible education to all Americans, everybody who lives in this country. That's what we want to do. And when you make the comment that people sound different, there's no doubt about that. And the way a person sounds makes a tremendous impact upon that person's opportunity to get a job or to move ahead. And you draw a lot of conclusions are drawn when you hear somebody over the telephone. And as I said in the brief opening comment, very meaningful to me as a child growing up, because my father sounded very different. And some of us sound different by way of our own accents. I still carry a Kansas accent. I've been trying to get rid of it forever, but I can't do it. I really don't want to do it. But we very much appreciate your coming here. We appreciate your leadership on the caucus, and we thank you for sharing your words with us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now turn to the next panel. Ms. Carolyn Gettridge, Ms. Tony Cook, Mr. Michael Lampkins, and at the witness table with them will be Jean Wan, Board President of the Oakland Unified School District, and Nabisha Shakir, a teacher coordinated for the Standard English Proficiency Program of the Oakland Unified School District. We very much appreciate your being here. We have set very limited time standards because we do have so many witnesses, but we will understand if you deviate just a bit from them. Our first witness is Mrs. Carolyn Gettridge, who was appointed superintendent of the Oakland Unified School District in 1994. A career educator, Mrs. Gettridge has worked in the Oakland schools in a number of positions, including a teacher, principal, and administrator of management and development. Thank you very much for joining us here. The floor is yours, Ms. Gettridge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Good morning. I certainly appreciate this opportunity to appear before the subcommittee, and I believe the experiences of the Oakland Unified School District will provide helpful insight into effective strategies to address the underachievement of African American and other minority students in our public schools. The single guiding goal in our district is to guarantee that conditions exist for all students to achieve academic success. This is our promise in Oakland. We are reinventing public schooling in a most fundamental way, moving beyond the right of students to attend school to a much more profound promise that students have the right to academic achievement in school. The children of Oakland deserve this right. They include 94% children of color. 53% are African American children. 60% qualify for free or reduced lunch. 48% come from households which receive aid to families with dependent children. Almost 30% have a home language other than English. Our students speak over 80 different languages, of which we formally track 61. Oakland is the 6th largest school district in the state of California, with over 52,000 students enrolled in our K-12 educational programs. Almost 4,000 more children are enrolled in our early childhood education centers, and still another 26,000 adults enroll in adult education courses. The recent actions by the Oakland Unified School District have sparked a national debate concerning the failure of our public schools to effectively serve the educational needs of African American children and other minority students. The media, however, has diverted attention away from our intent and goal of providing English language development and the more fundamental issue of student achievement in urban school systems. The action of the board is a bold response to a chronic and growing gap between those who are successful in our public schools and those who are not. In our district, for example, the grade point average of African American students is 1.8 on a 4-point scale, a D+, while white and Asian students average over a 3.0 or a B. The SAT scores show an equally widening gap. African American students in Oakland score 97 points below the national average in verbal skills and 110 points below the national average in mathematics. Let me be very clear about the key factor determining success in our public schools. It is not race, it is not innate ability. Rather, it is a combination of factors such as creating an engaging learning environment that is language-based and using instructional strategies which enable students to achieve success through effective effort and quality instruction. While there are exceptions, this data clearly paints a picture of an educational system in Oakland which fails a large percentage of students. And unfortunately, this pattern of failure is the norm for our nation's urban school districts. Our current educational practices will not prepare many African American and other minority students to perform at high levels of achievement in or out of the classroom. In Oakland, we have taken a stand and stated that this achievement gap is no longer acceptable. What is at issue here is not whether Ebonics is a language. This is a scholarly debate for linguists. What is at issue are the steps we, as parents, government leaders, and educational leaders are willing to take to address the chronic underachievement of these students. What are we doing to address these alarming statistics? We have engaged in district-wide reform in our school system. We have established high standards in a rigorous academic curriculum, algebra for all students by the 9th grade, laboratory science in middle schools and high schools, technology and computer classes, and a full 4 years of English for high school students. We have put in place an accountability system from the boardroom to the classroom And this fall, we will widely publish our first school-by-school report card on key academic indicators. But that is not all. In order to achieve these high standards, we have had to institute new practices, new ways of teaching. These new ways include a clear recognition of the connection between language, literacy, and learning. Math and science are no longer the gatekeepers determining post-secondary enrollment and success. Language is. Without a mastery of standard English, students are not able to succeed in mathematics and science. This is why we have taken the action we have and emphasized the linkage between language, literacy, and learning. The Standard English Proficiency Program, or SEP, is one such strategy. SEP represents the application of the principles of English language development for students who bring from home language patterns other than standard English. Does this program work? We think so. At Prescott Elementary School, for example, which has been an early leader in providing SEP strategies in the classroom, students' reading scores are consistently above the district average. Much has been made also of the issue of funding. We are fully committed to the reallocation of our current resources to fund a comprehensive array of strategies to implement district-wide reforms, which guarantee all of our students the opportunity for academic success. We have not requested state or federal funds for this purpose. We do, however, believe that the federal government can play a role to support the efforts of urban school districts. First and foremost, expand early childhood education programs for all children aged 3 and 4. Preschool is a proven and cost-effective strategy to improve the education and the life circumstances of children. Second, fund a longer school day and school year to support educational achievement needs of urban youth and youth throughout this country. Third, expand funding for professional development opportunities so that we can continue to retool the teacher workforce.
Ms. Gettridge, you're substantially beyond your time. Could you summarize the balance
Yes, I
of your
can.
statement?
I firmly believe that we're on the verge of becoming a land of new promise and opportunity. Our educational system is the guarantee for that opportunity. Our moral obligation is to act on the data we have and take bold steps that we may cross the bridge together into the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gettridge. Senator Harkin, who's ranking on the committee, cannot be here. He is attending the funeral of Senator Paul Tsongas. I had wanted to go there myself. Senator Tsongas and I were colleagues for the first 4 years that I was here. But with witnesses coming from so far, we decided that I should stay and proceed with the hearing. We've been joined by distinguished colleague, Senator Larry Craig. Senator Craig, would you care to make an opening statement?
Mr. Chairman, I do have an opening statement. I'd ask that be submitted to the record.
Will be made a part of the record in full.
And why don't we get on with the witnesses? They've traveled far, and we're all anxious to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Craig. We'll turn now to Ms. Toni Cook, elected to the Oakland, California Board of Education in 1990. She serves on the Mayor's Educational Cabinet and the City Council's Community Policy Task Force, has also served as Associate Dean of Howard University's School of Architecture and Planning and on the faculty of Morgan State University in Baltimore. Welcome, Ms. Cook. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Senator Spector. Mr. Chairman, I'm excited about having this opportunity to affirm much of what Superintendent Gettridge has already shared with you. But I think more importantly, to get away, move out of the way some of the myths. Because I think that what Oakland did, it has excited this country to talk about urban education, and in particular, the education of the African-American young people. First, let me just give you a brief summary of the task force, because I think far too many people think it was 30-odd some people who sat in a room and had nothing else to do but to devise a plan that, quote, speaks down to our children. The task force was comprised of scholars, one of which is from the University of California, Berkeley, Dr. Agbu, comprised of administrators who must manage our school sites, teachers who have the awesome job day to day of educating our children, parents who entrust their children to us, and community members who have a stake in whether or not our children are well educated. And of course, myself as a board member. This, in fact, was one of the few opportunities that the elected official, the administrators who must put it into place, the researchers who give us our framework, and community who is a guiding part of our school system comes together to look at an issue, to depend on research, and to get it through our Board of Education. This task force spent some 6 months examining the issue. It was put together at my request to the superintendent. It was a simple board request. They looked at this issue over time, looked at research. What the task force concluded, that the key to achievement of any of our students, whether they be African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinos, Caucasians, it matters not, is how well we master the language of commerce, and in this country, it's the English language. Ours is a literacy goal. As the superintendent has indicated to you, that we allowed reference to several names in which the black language, Ebonics, Pan-African language systems. We allowed reference to that, but in neither statement, neither the original version or the amended version, will you read a reference where we called it Ebonics. We made reference to what the scholars have referred to it. This was the intent of the task force, and they came forth with 9 recommendations, not just one. But we believe, as I've said before, that the key to any child learning, the key to African Americans learning, is how well we master the language of commerce. And as the superintendent has indicated, our guiding force has not been whether or not you agree or disagree with Ebonics. It is the reality of what is happening in the Oakland Unified School District. 71% of the students enrolled in special education, of which there are about approximately 5,000, are African Americans. 37% of the students enrolled in the gifted and talented program classes are African Americans. 64% of the students retained are African Americans. 67% of students classified as truant are African Americans. 71% of the African American males attend school on a regular basis. 19% of the 12th grade students who are African Americans do not graduate. 80% of all suspended students are African Americans. And yes, it is true. Of those seniors who graduate, they graduate with an average of approximately 1.8. If we continue in the way that we're going, there is no way in which we can make good to these young people the new promise of America. We have an obligation to these youngsters, both moral and ethically. I believe the Oakland Unified School District, the board to the parents, has indeed made a bold statement. And without the statement and the step that we made, unfortunately, Mr. Senator, we would not be here in this dialogue. If we've contributed nothing else to the discussion on some 1,000 days plus before we enter the 21st century, you and I are sitting here before America talking about the educational status of the African American student. And I hope that we leave here with you and I and America coming up with more recommendations, more solutions. We owe these young people, as we owe all of our young people, the best public education that we can offer. And I believe that you and I, together, can give them their promise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cook. We now turn to Mr. Michael Lampkins, who is a 12th grade student at Oakland Technical High, where he is Associate Student Body Vice President. He is a student director on the Board of Education. For the past 4 years, he has been a staff member of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Oakland and was recognized as the 1995-96 Pacific Regional Youth of the Year. Welcome, Mr.
Chairman.
Lampkins. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, I saw a lump in this young man's throat just now. And so while you're getting ready to make your statement, let me say that I was once a student body officer in a high school And I think I'd have been scared to death testifying before a congressional panel of this nature. So relax, take a deep breath. We're very anxious to hear from you. Okay.
Mr. Lampkins, whichever side of the podium you're on, there's a lot of tension in being in these hearings. Senator Craig and I even have some ourselves. Yeah. So it's your turn.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and distinguished panel members. As we embark on the 21st century, I come to you today with the plea. I want to be a part of the new promise. I want to be able to have a competitive education and advanced degrees so that I can compete in the global workforce. But in order to compete, I need a solid education. I want to learn. I want teachers and administrators who not only want to see me succeed, but who will help me to succeed. I want my fellow students to join me on that quest to success so that we can take over the leadership of this country and this world. I'm gonna give you a little background information about myself. I am 17 years old and I currently work at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Oakland. I interact with you on a day-to-day basis. I have been recognized as the Pacific Region Youth of the Year for Boys and Girls Club of America due to my participation in community activities, as well as my participation within school, home, and within the world. In fact, I have held audience with President Clinton. But when I walk out the door, 9 times out of 10, I am perceived quite differently. If the teachers do not understand me, and in turn, I do not understand the teachers, learning does not take place. There must be common ground. There must be communication. There must be some type of understanding. The Oakland Public Schools want to create this understanding. Just as a doctor must be trained to diagnose symptoms of disease, a teacher must be trained to recognize language patterns. And although those patterns may be different than standard English, they are not deficient. And with proper tooling, proper education, a bridge will be built so that the youth do meet the standard English skills so they can speak, write, and read proficiently. I firmly believe that through communication and through understanding, learning does take place. And as I said before, if a teacher does not understand a student and a student does not understand a teacher, learning does not take place. We have spent countless amount of time debating the issue whether or not Ebonics is a language. I am not a linguist. I am, however, a brother, a student, and someone who cares. It is important that not only African American students, but students in general be literate. The students must acquire the 3 L's before they can acquire the 3 R's. The 3 L's being learning, literacy, and language. Once they have the 3 L's, the 3 R's are then possible. Without the 3 L's, the 3 R's seem foreign. There has to be common ground. There has to be tools in place to help students achieve standard American English. This board has recognized that the students do come into the classrooms with an established language pattern. As a child, growing up in your households, you adopt the language patterns that you hear on a day-to-day basis. And that is what you provide, and that is what you have to offer when you step into the classrooms. When a teacher is able to recognize those patterns, and when a teacher embraces that child feels welcome, that child feels nurtured, and that child will accept learning. Again, I plead, I want to be a part of the new promise. I want my fellow students to be a part of that new promise. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lampkins. That's a very impressive statement for anyone, especially someone in the 12th grade. And as a product of the system, you speak very well and make a very, very good showing. We're going to proceed now with 5-minute rounds for the members. And Let me begin with your comments, Mr. Lampkins, and I certainly endorse what you say about being a competitor in the 21st century, both at home and abroad. You said that when you walk out the door, you are perceived differently. What did you mean by that? Would you amplify that as to how you feel that you are perceived differently?
When I make the statement that I am perceived differently is that just as Superintendent Getrich and Board Member Cook has stated, 53% of African American students make up the Oakland Unified School District. And out of that 53%, the average is a 1.8 GPA. I look at myself to be an exception, but I do represent those students. Those students are my counterparts. They are, I would say, my constituents. And as part of my duty as a student board member, I have to work with the students so that they understand the board.
When the students come to school, have you found that they have a need for a different kind of linguistic or language instruction?
I think I made the statement before, and I will say it again. When a student doesn't understand a teacher and a teacher doesn't understand a student, learning does not take place.
Well, when the students come to you, have you found that from your own experience that the students do not understand the teacher and the teacher does not understand the students?
It is definitely evident. You have teachers who have went into the classrooms, not have been able to understand the students, and have classified those students as special education students.
Did you have a situation for your own personal involvement in education?
Like I said, I consider myself to be an exception. I have had teachers who embraced me, who nurtured me, who understood, and who respected what I brought to the classroom. So I have been an exception, but there are not many exceptions. These numbers show that there are not many exceptions. We need to bring the numbers out the slumps that they are currently in.
Ms. Gettridge, turning to the question, which may not be the real question, but it is on a lot of people's minds, is whether Ebonics is a different language, or precisely what it is as to how it would be defined. On the Oakland Board resolution for January 15th of this year, after the controversy arose, the statement was made, quote, a program featuring African language system principles to move students from the language patterns they bring to school to English proficiency, close quote. Now, what do you mean by African language systems principles? And how would you really answer the question which is on a lot of minds as to whether it is a separate language?
Senator Specter, the issue regarding African language systems, Ebonics, Pan-African communications behaviors being a language or not is not the debate of the Oakland schools. There are linguists who will testify today who will probably give more in-depth understanding of that than can I. The position of the Oakland schools is very clear. We recognize that the children who come to us, many of the children who come to us, have language systems that are not consistent with standard English. Teachers need to be aware of those systems, and they must have tools to move the students from those systems to standard English. So we have not taken a position as to whether it is a language. We simply acknowledge that these systems exist.
Well, when a student does not speak the basic English, why is there a need to teach some intermediate language before you teach the student English?
No, there is not. But there is a need to know that the language pattern has a fundamental basis in a grammar, in a structure, in a syntax, and what tools are available to move that student to standard English. The language patterns, and I'm sure that Dr. Labov, Dr. Williams, and Dr. Taylor will talk about this in their comments, but the language system has an African language base that includes English language words transposed thereupon. And an understanding of these principles will allow teachers to more effectively engage with students. Just one final point on that. Language is the mechanism for engaging in the learning process. If for any reason the teacher believes, as Michael indicated earlier, that because that language pattern is different, that the student may not have the academic capacity to learn the more challenging content. That is an assumption that can be made. Further, when students have an opportunity to engage in learning and they are consistently told that what they say or how they express themselves is wrong, with no explanation of the reason that it is not acceptable or standard English, then students begin to shut down and will at some point either intellectually or physically drop out of the process. We want to change that reality for many of the students in Oakland by giving teachers the ability to address these issues in a more consistent, thoughtful, and respectful way.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gettridge. The red light went on in the midst of your answer, so I yield now to my colleague, Senator Craig.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Ms. Cook, I think we all recognize the importance of a language for communicating and understanding what's communicated, and I sense that this is what this is all about. You had mentioned the panel and the work they did. Was it solely this work, recognizing that you were focusing on the problems of the school district and the statistics that we have here, the 71%, the 37%, was it the language issue, the communicative issue only, or were there other issues involved or other recommendations that came from that panel that the school board and the school district system's looking at?
You're absolutely right. The task force made 9 recommendations in terms of a total plan. The language issue was just one of those recommendations seen as a key. And it was about literacy, not just reading or writing. It was a literacy function. And in fact, in some of the materials that have been shared with you, the task force recommendations are included.
I'll look at those.
Please. And I believe that we are keeping our promise and acting on that. And while I have the mic, I'm sorry that the other senator left. Would you share with him that the Oakland Unified School District is the 2nd district in the state of California to adopt a mandatory uniform policy? That is just one thing that we are doing in our rather holistic approach to improving student ability. We wanted our students to concentrate more on substance than style.
Sure.
So if you'll share that with him, I'm sure he'll be pleased.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you very much, Senator Craig. Before turning to the next panel, Ms. Gettridge, I'd like to ask you just one more question about a bit of your testimony where you said that none of the federal funds were used on this program. Do you segregate the funds? You do receive Title I funds and other federal funds in a variety of ways, don't you?
My comment was that we have not requested state or federal funds for this purpose. The Standard English Proficiency Program does include some use of Title I funds on a school site basis. Those decisions are made by the school site councils at the respective schools as a part of their overall planning process. The decision as to whether or not these resources are appropriate for those students is made at the local level.
Senator Spector, may I just say one thing?
Ms. Kwan, you may.
Thank you. You can see as president of the board why I'm very proud to be president of the Oakland board this year, and for the last 4 years I was the president of the Asian Pacific Islanders School Board Association in California. When you spoke of federal funds earlier and you raised the issue of bilingual funds, it was never the intent of this board to use bilingual funds. To be quite honest, as an Asian American, I don't think the funds are adequate even for the currently defined populations. However, many of our kids in Oakland, a third of them are immigrants, and their home language is something other than English. They sit in classrooms next to African American children who also have an issue of English proficiency. So I think that's where the confusion came out. parents sit and they see that one group of children, teachers get special training and special help and materials, and another group of children who also don't speak standard English don't get special training for their teachers and special help. Clearly, at many of our schools, they have decided through the site decision process to use Title I funds to develop a holistic training system for teachers. And it's not that we wouldn't welcome the federal program looking at language development programs that would merge ESL, bilingual education, SEP. The heart of it, though, and let me just say, because of the media hype, is that we as an urban board are waging a war on a growing gap in poverty and achievement. We must use every tool. And one of the most important tools is that our children, whether their home language is Cambodian, and in Prescott School, the other third of the students are Cambodian students, and in fact, when they learn English, they often learn African-American English or dialect in their school, and it becomes more complicated. Not only are we teaching them English, but we have to teach them the difference between what their classmates speak and standard English. That's why in California we're really looking at a much more comprehensive system of language development training, which frankly, I'm sorry Mr. Fairchild's not here, has a lot of grammar, lots of phonetics. Perhaps the only difference from what you and I may have had when we were in elementary school is it used some wonderful African American and Asian American and Hispanic literature that may not have been in the curriculum when we were growing up. But it's important, I think, the heart of our resolution is that we respect the home language of our children, and we take them from that home language to standard English. And I'll just point out yesterday's headlines of the business section. It talked about the wage gap. It talked about African Americans who cannot get jobs because they don't speak standard English. We as school board members have to do everything to give our kids an equal chance. We didn't think this was controversial. We were not trying to be politically correct. We were just trying to do what sort of made sense to us, that seems to be working with our kids and is showing improved test scores.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kwan, for those comments. One final question, Ms. Gettridge. If action were taken by Congress in line with what House resolution has been introduced by Representative Peter King, which would prohibit the use of federal funds to support projects in schools based on Ebonics, would that affect your program?
As currently constructed, it would, but I also believe that it would conflict with a basic principle of the Title I funding, which is allowing local school sites the discretion to use their resources in ways that they believe benefit their students.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Shakir. You've been at the panel. Would you care to add a word or two?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to speak for the teachers in Oakland who have volunteered to develop, design, and implement this program for the last 4 years. We have 125 teachers coming from 26 school sites who are very excited about this methodology. We have teachers from every ethnic background. They use the principles, and these teachers, many of them are veteran teachers that have been teaching in the district successfully for over 20, 25, 30, 35 years. And they are very happy at the end of their career to learn about this new strategy that we are giving them. And with this implementation, they are seeing greater successes in their classrooms and just a joy to learn something new as a teacher. So we thank you again for allowing us to be here today and to hear the voice of the teachers in Oakland and I'm sure around the state of California from the Standard English Proficiency Program.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Shakir and Ms. Kwan, Ms. Gettridge, Mr. Cook, Ms. Cook, and Mr. Lampkins. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We'll now turn to the second panel, Reverend Amos Brown and Mr. Armstrong Williams. If you come forward, please. Reverend Amos Brown is the national chairman of the Commission on Civil Rights and Human Services of the National Baptists of the United States of America, Incorporated. Reverend Brown serves on the Board of Supervisors of the City and County of San Francisco, and since 1976 has been the pastor of the Black Baptist Church in San Francisco. Reverend Brown, you're welcome here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen. I come today not in isolation and not representing myself. I come representing the mind and spirit of the largest religious body of African Americans in this nation, the National Baptist Convention, USA Incorporated, with a constituency of 8.2 million members and 36,000 churches. Yesterday at our board meeting in Nashville, Tennessee, we unanimously voted to not support the concept of Ebonics as it is presently defined and constituted. I have a prepared statement that I wish to read for your hearing.
Your full statement, Reverend Brown, will be made a part of the record. To the extent that you can summarize it within the 5-minute time limit, we would appreciate it.
That I will do.
Thank you.
During the past month, the brouhaha about teaching Ebonics in Oakland and elsewhere has produced, in my estimation, more heat than light. The focus on Ebonics, a so-called language, oversimplifies a complex problem and acts as a red herring, distracting us from the hard questions. The key question is not whether African Americans and other minorities can master standard English. The question, and it is pertinent in every state, is how can these youngsters excel so they are prepared to embrace the vast opportunities America offers? The answer does not lie in the reductionism of Ebonics. It resides in the inadequately tapped holism of America. Without a holistic approach, which draws on multiple sources, a significant percentage of our population will grow up ignorant and unskilled. They will lack the internal discipline for the 21st century, a discipline that comes from a positive cultural milieu and a vast, vibrant support system. That discipline, which becomes self-discipline, is nurtured by a multi-pronged environment that has expectations. We need to recreate that environment. A recent article in the Washington Post pointed out the painful truth that parents, teachers, churches, and the broader community expect too little from African American youngsters. Unfortunately, too few African American youngsters expect enough of themselves. Too few of them, not to mention America in general, know about the endless chain of heroes and heroines, sung and unsung, who surmounted racist obstacles and survived crises because of their inner discipline and the strength and expectations of their communities that nurtured them. Martin Luther King Jr. once received a C grade in English course at Morehouse College, but he recovered and responded to the pressures of men like Benjamin Elijah Mays, the president of Morehouse, who cajoled, encouraged, and pushed his students to excel. Walter Turnbull, founder of the Boys Choir of Harlem, scoured the community for young men who he would inspire to aspire to unsuspected heights by his vision, expectations, and discipline. That's equally true of Lawrence Clifton Jones, who in 1909 in Braxton, Mississippi, founded the Piney Woods School under a cedar tree, the first classroom for his students who came from poor rural district backgrounds and spoke broken English, just like the poor whites they lived among, was a log for them to sit on. That didn't matter to Jones. He had clear expectations for the students. 2 years ago, at a reception at the ambassador's home in Dakar, Senegal, West Africa, I heard students from Piney Woods School sing Lift Every Voice and sing both in French and English with impeccable diction and with tight harmony. These students had responded to expectations that were built into their curriculum. This hearing in conjunction with examples like those I have mentioned, will alert the American public that we must support President Clinton's thrust for educational programs. In particular, we need programs that would enable the church, the basic institution of African Americans, to fulfill its noble role as a bastion of hope. Use wisely and responsibly the funds for these programs, under which communities and churches collaborate, can equip our youngsters to leap into the mainstream and make their contribution. To do this, our young people must master standard English. They must gain mastery by continuous exposure to the masters. And that means that their parents, teachers, and communities must model for them, point them in the right direction, and spell out expectations. At this moment in history, too many of these youngsters are not conditioned to excel. Low achievement, however, does not reside in their genes. It's in their conditioning, in their immediate culture.
Reverend
They
Brown,
need to be programmed for excellence.
Could you summarize the balance of your statement?
The balance of the statement is that we need a holistic program that involves the home setting, turning that television off 3 hours a night to study, the church community serving as a bastion and a support system, where after school our youngsters are brought into those churches instead of hanging on corners and really being loved into learning by their elders in the community. And we need teachers who will get their attitudes right. The issue is not per se Ebonics. In Oakland, unfortunately, you have 85% plus of the teachers are white. I'm not impugning all white teachers, but God knows that the reason why many of these youngsters do not excel is because they're teachers who have attitudes, they're not a part of the community, and therefore they do not earn the right to discipline and challenge these youngsters to excel. Our appeal is, if there is a portion where there needs to be some Ebonics, hallelujah, let them have it. But let us stop this simplistic, reductionistic approach that only deals with a major problem in an isolated, half-baked, half-done manner. We need a holistic program to deal with the underachievement of black students all over this nation, and it's not just in Oakland. It's in San Francisco, it's in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois, and New York, too. The question is, are we able to assume the responsibility of facing the challenge and doing something collectively and not in isolation?
Well, it's a powerful statement, Reverend Brown. Thank you very much. You said in your last comment that if they need some Ebonics in Oakland, you'd be prepared to let them have some Ebonics in Oakland. Did I understand you correctly?
I'm saying that there are always alternative measures, but I'm concerned that we have focused the issue basically on language. There are other groups that do not master standard English, but because of the support systems and resources that are available in the home and the community, they do master science, they do master biology. The basic question is, are we going to provide the support system for a holistic program? And I think this is what the Department of Education ought to be looking at, and not just concentrating on an issue of giving dignity and respect to a way that we talk about privately. I don't need no teacher in the schoolhouse to validate me. We speak that broken language at home. Martin Luther King spoke it at home and at Morehouse. But whenever he went to Harvard or to Yale or to Princeton, you better believe it, he talked so much that he could talk the horns off a billy goat with eloquence. He was able to communicate about Socrates, about Plato, Euripides, and all of the D's, because he had a bicultural educational program. And in the words of W.B. Du Bois, he was trained to see reality through two eyes, through our two-ness. And I think that's what we got to enable our young people to function in this country, have the currency and the facility to function. And we need to do that in a holistic way.
Well, that's a powerful message. I concur with you about turning off the television set, Reverend Brown, except for the part of C-SPAN to hear you.
Just for 3 hours, though, not all day, though. We give them some time.
We now turn to Mr. Armstrong Williams, who's a syndicated columnist with the Los Angeles Times and host of the TV show The Right Side. Mr. Armstrong, he is no stranger to Capitol Hill, having worked for Senator Strom Thurmond and Congressman Carroll Campbell and Floyd Spence. He has a very distinguished record, and we welcome you here
Thank you, Senator.
this morning, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. What I have to say today will not take long. In fact, the issue of education in this country is quite a straightforward matter. First of all, I would like to pay my respects to all of the hard-working, dedicated teachers and school board members in Oakland, California, and all over this country. They are doing the best they can with resources they currently have available. The controversy and the tumult surrounding the Oakland School Board's proposal to use Ebonics as a means of teaching standard English, though, deeply troubles me. I think that the words and sentiments conveyed in the media have been divisive rather than constructive. But even more troubling to me, Senator, is what I think is a misguided approach to education in this country. From a personal perspective, I am fully aware that as a country of many heritages, there are many colloquial idioms spoken in this country. Where I come from in South Carolina, there are dialects such as Gullah, which might be incomprehensible to everyone in this chamber. And I know that in casual conversation, rules of grammar, syntax, and vocabulary are bent, broken, and inflected to convey friendship and familiarity. I would deny no one the right to express themselves in the customary manner of their native culture or place of origin. But when we talk about teaching standard English to children, we are talking about investing them with the standard currency of this great nation of ours. We are instilling in them the means to communicate in the marketplace of ideas as well as the marketplace of commerce and governance. We are saying to them, Senator, come into the fold, plant your ideas and your strengths in this land so that we may all be stronger. I can remember my nieces and nephews in South Carolina who spoke an idiom, or slang, if you will, that was not standard English. I remember teaching them using a phonics game, which was fun, enjoyable to them and their parents. Within 2 months, they were able to speak standard grammatical structure, and they were so proud to have learned and be able to take part in a whole new world. I can also remember walking into my first clearance class at South Carolina State College and initially being completely confused by all the teachers because what the teacher spoke was totally French. She did not speak one word of English. Nonetheless, Senator, I learned, and I think it was what was best for me at that time. And I have also here with me today my editorial assistant, Amari West, who was born and raised a short distance from here in Southeast Washington. I remember him telling me that when he attended Ketchum Elementary School in Anacostia, his mother constantly corrected his broken English, not allowing him or his brothers to make a habit out of speaking his neighborhood slang. In fact, she took her children, Senator, out of the public schools and taught them using phonic tapes. I can honestly say that this young man is one of the finest writers and thinkers that I have ever met at his young age of 23. They did not achieve such levels of proficiency and expertise by someone talking down to them. No one ever accepted substandard speech and writing from them. They were not coddled into thinking that their cultural dialects were a hindrance or that they were in any different situation. Rather, they were encouraged, Senator. They were encouraged, cajoled, loved, and above all, shown a higher standard. This is what makes them the men they are today. What we're seeing with the Ebonics issue is really about conflicting values in education. Let's be honest here. And on a broader level, Senator, conflicting philosophies about social understanding and equality. Proponents of Ebonics feel that teachers should be able to relate to the students by showing that they too are able to speak the structure, cultural, student idiom. But I do not agree with this approach. and I'll tell you why. A teacher would not teach mathematics by trying to show that he or she could make mistakes in addition or subtraction. Must one senator have to smoke marijuana to be able to relate to teenage drug addiction? Should they smoke marijuana in order to teach them a better way? Definitely not. And the same is true with language. I feel that teachers should be a model of what is just and proper in formal speech. They, in other words, should set the standard. Schools should not be a feel-good session where whatever anyone wants to speak should be understood. It should be a place where diverse experiences, backgrounds, and strengths should meet a common goal: to learn from each other. And that means having a common language. The essence of equality, Senator, should be to create and maintain a level playing field. Now, in closing, I am aware that the issue of standard language versus cultural dialect is a value-laden issue. People feel devalued if what they do is not accepted as the norm. Yet I think everyone can see the value of having a norm. There will always be differences in speech, meaning, and pronunciation. But that does not mean that America has to become the Tower of Babel. We have a standard. Let's stick with it and help others to learn it. And finally, let me specifically address the issue of Black English in America. Since the early part of this century, there has been a debate about the cultural saliency of Black English. Cultural anthropologists such as Franklin Frazier and Melville Herkovitz had heated debates over whether the languages and customs of Black Americans were vestiges of slavery or whether, in fact, they were patterns of speech and culture that originated in Africa. The debate is still important today with respect to the Ebonics controversy. Supporters say that speakers of Ebonics are expressing something innately African. Thus, they say that it should be preserved as a cultural legacy. Detractors say that Black speech arose from the lack of education and acculturation.
Mr. Williams, could you summarize the balance of your statement?
We are not here today to resolve the debate I just mentioned. In fact, the argument today, Senator, is quite an academic one. We know that there is a standard of English. We know that children would be better equipped if they spoke it. And we know that the only way to transmit the language effectively is for teachers to be models for their students. So respectfully, then I must conclude that Ebonics is bad policy for an already bad situation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. When you talk about the conflict in values of education and the cultural dialect, I would ask, you were here, of course, when Ms. Carolyn Gettridge testified. Did you disagree with her approach? Is something that she said as to what is being done in the Oakland School District something that you would disagree with?
I am trying to understand the Ebonics debate every day. Because
well, I ask you that question, Mr. Williams, because I'm not sure that we're on different tracks, and I'm trying to come to grips with the specifics as to what you disagree with, as to what she said, if there is some area of concrete, specific disagreement.
Well, I think she has admitted that Ebonics is not a language. And I think she's also admitted, if I heard her correctly, is that they have a problem with the kids who speak slang. And there needs to be a way for teachers to communicate with those kids to speak proper standard language.
Do you disagree with any of that?
I don't disagree with the spirit of it, but I would disagree if you would try to say to these students that the teacher must come down to where you are to understand your dialect, instead of saying that the student needs to go where the teacher is, because the teacher should always be the model.
Well, you heard Mr. Lambert say, and you have to, the teachers and the students have to talk the same language and understand each other.
No, absolutely not. I took French. I did not understand a word of it. I had to learn to speak French. The teacher was the model, and because the teacher never changed her standards for me, I was forced and was able to learn a language that I never thought I could.
But did the teacher ever say what the English translation was of French?
She always spoke French.
Always spoke
Always.
French?
From the beginning of the semester to the end. That's all she spoke was French. I had to learn it.
Without any indication as to what of the French were referred to English?
No, she spoke French. She had the book. We had little syllabuses that we had to follow. Basically, I had to learn it on my own and through study groups. I was forced to learn it. That may seem foreign, but many people can relate to that. We had to
Well, all
learn
right, then you had books and you had study groups, which gave you the bridge.
But that's fine. But we're talking about the teacher. The teacher should always be the model. Teachers should not try to learn slang. That is my argument. And learn bad English.
Reverend Brown, do you want to make a comment?
Yes, very much so. I'm sure, Mr. Spector, you heard Gardner Calvin Taylor deliver the prayer at the president's inauguration.
I did.
Gardner Taylor is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Went to one of the struggling academies of the South, Leland College. Dr. Taylor shared with me the other day out of his childhood experiences that the teachers in his classroom had a standard. They did not speak broken English. They came to class speaking broken English, but the teacher loved them into learning. It's a question of what the teacher is to the student. And if the teacher is there with an attitude condescending to the student, you will never be able to turn that student around. I go back to my point that we need to have a program that deals with teacher attitudes and with the attitudes of parents in the home to be open. Also, my parents, who didn't make it through high school, made it on to the 8th grades. They had some broken English also, but they had an expectation of more coming from me and my other siblings. It's a question, I repeat, as I stated earlier, of what we expect and what we see in the students. And in Oakland, California, and in San Francisco, whether the teacher is black, blue, green, yellow, polka dot, that teacher must go to that classroom with the right attitude, and if a child does speak wrongly, correct that child in love. Let me give you just one point. In my home church in Jackson, Mississippi, College Hill Baptist Church, I never shall forget, one Sunday morning I was reading the scripture, and I was reading the resurrection narrative, and I called sepulcher. Brother T.S. Alexander, who worked with the State Teachers Association, pulled me aside and said after the service, young man, the word is sepulcher, not sepulcher. I never forgot it, but I didn't resent it, and I didn't feel bad. And I think that if these teachers put their arms around these children and give them the standard, they will learn standard English and not feel threatened and still speak their broken language at home.
Well, I'm not sure that Ms. Gettridge was talking about speaking broken English. Just a little irregular, but we're going to recall you, Ms. Gettridge, to ask you, and we have to conclude the panel because we have to move on to the next one. But do you speak broken English to the students?
Absolutely not. And I want to say to Reverend Brown that I, too, am from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was baptized in the church that Gardner C. Taylor pastored by Reverend T.J. Jemison, Mount Zion Baptist Church. So my experience, too, is one where standard English may not have been the most prevalent method of communication. I, too, had teachers and parents and friends who were excellent models of standard English.
Do you disagree? Do you disagree with the thrust of what Reverend Brown and Mr. Williams have said?
Absolutely not. I think that the thrust of the comments are the same, but I do want to point out that the language system students bring to school does not include slang. It is not about slang or the rap culture of the language of many students today. The linguist will certainly give you more information about that, but this is not slang. These are patterns of language development that students bring to school that must be corrected if students are to engage in literacy activities. It is the difference between what one hears and says in acquiring the language and being able to engage that language on a printed page.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go on, gentlemen. We really have to move on to the next panel.
Just 10 seconds, please.
Go.
You asked the question, are alternative approaches desperately needed? I would say absolutely, unequivocally yes. But the approaches to heal what ails American school senators should be rooted in a philosophy which doctors treats the patients rather than contract the illness.
All right, thank you very much. Very much appreciate your testimony, Reverend Brown and Mr. Williams. Sometimes it's good to have the witnesses side by side. Occasionally, even on the Senate debate, we have debate instead of just speech making, but not very often. Now I'd like to move to the next and last panel, Dr. Orlando Taylor, Dr. Robert Williams, Dr. William Labov, and Dr. Michael Casserly. Our first witness on the panel is Dr. Orlando Taylor, who is the Dean of the Howard University Graduate School of Arts and Science and a nationally known expert on Ebonics. Dr. Taylor, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman.
All statements will be made a part of the record in full, and we'd appreciate it if we can proceed with in the 5-minute time limit on the summaries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to congratulate you and the members of the subcommittee for having the foresight to convene this special hearing today to address issues pertaining to language and the underachievement of African American students, at least of many African American students. We live in a nation that is characterized by a rich diversity in language and communication, where numerous regional and social dialects are spoken. And we've had much testimony here today to characterize some of those regional and social dialects. In many ways, the defining attribute of the United States is diversity. And like all cultural groups in America, indeed the world, there is great diversity of language use in the African American community, ranging from the King's English to what some linguists refer to as Ebonics. The linguistic system referred to as Ebonics, which is different from African American slang, and I think it's very important to make that point here now, is spoken by some, but by no means all African Americans, and by many African American children. It is a stereotype, and it is incorrect to think that this variety of English has nothing in common with Standard English, or that its speakers do not understand Standard English, or that its speakers speak it all the time. Many African Americans are competent in several language systems and switch from one language system to another according to audience and situation. I would like to highlight just 3 points from my written statement this morning, and they are as follows. Number one, the current controversy surrounding Ebonics has forced us once again to come face to face with one of the quintessential issues in contemporary American life, and that is, how do we accommodate, indeed celebrate, cultural and linguistic diversity on the one hand, and on the other hand, teach all of our students a language system, in this case Standard English, that will facilitate academic achievement and career opportunities, as well as cohesion and harmony within our nation. Number two, it's important to remember that the most important point to remember about the Ebonics debate is not whether it exists, or whether it is valid, or where it came from, or what to call it, or is it a language or a dialect, but rather that far too many African American children have not acquired sufficient competence in Standard English to enhance academic success, and that traditional teaching methods for teaching Standard English, which often dismiss or devalue the language systems that many African American children bring to school, have been unsuccessful with too many African American children. The fact that we're having this hearing today provides clear testimony, in my opinion, to the failure of traditional teaching methods for far too many African American children. While I would not assert that the acquisition of Standard English is a guarantee for academic success, I would state that academic achievement is severely compromised for youngsters who do not acquire competence in Standard English for speaking, writing, and reading purposes. We as a nation should be open to other strategies to teaching standard English. Strategies which use children's home or peer language systems as a bridge, as we've said so often today, a point of departure, if you will, to teach the school's language. These pedagogical techniques are not new. They've been used in many California school districts, for example, for almost 15 years. Aside from Oakland, there are 16 other school districts in California alone, including Los Angeles, where more than 20,000 students in that district's 93,000 or so African-American students are enrolled in a standard English proficiency program that is very similar to the program that you've heard described here this morning. Similar programs have been reported in such diverse jurisdictions as Atlanta, Seattle, Miami, and Dallas. I think it's important for everyone here to remember and to understand that using Ebonics or any other vernacular language system as a bridge to teaching standard English should never be equated to teaching Ebonics or requiring teachers to speak it. I do believe, in conclusion, there is a federal role here. I think that the federal government can provide incentives and support to colleges and universities to produce a better corps of teachers for the next century. A teacher corps that knows more about cultural and linguistic diversity and how to use that diversity to enhance, widen, and expand their language and communication skills of their students. It can also provide support for more research on the rich linguistic heritage of our nation and to determine techniques for teaching standard English that are more effective than the ones we are using today. And in conclusion, I would simply say, I think the challenge that we face today in our schools in this country is to make certain that we can produce students who can walk and talk with kings, but not lose the common touch.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taylor. Our next witness is Dr. William Labov, professor in the Department of Linguistics at the University of Pennsylvania, authored numerous books and articles on linguistics, including many publications in the area of non-standard English and its role in education, especially for African Americans. Welcome, Dr. Labov, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Spector. I'm testifying today as a representative of an approach to the study of language that's called sociolinguistics. It's a scientific study based on the recording and measurement of language as it's used in America today. And I'm now completing research supported by NSF and NEH that's mapping changes in the English language throughout North America for both mainstream and minority communities. Well, since '66, I've done a number of studies of language in the African American community, beginning with work in South Harlem for the Office of Education that was aimed at answering the question, are the language differences between black and white children responsible for reading failure in the inner cities? The term Ebonics, that's our main focus here, has been used to suggest that there is a language or features of language that's common to all people of African ancestry, whether they live in Africa, Brazil, or the United States. Now, linguists who have published studies of the African American community don't use this term, but they refer instead to African American vernacular English, a dialect spoken by most residents of the inner cities. Now, this African American vernacular English shares most of its grammar and vocabulary with other dialects of English, but it's distinct in many ways. It's more different from standard English than any other dialect spoken in continental North America. It's not simply slang or grammatical mistakes, has been pointed out several times here, but a well-formed set of rules of pronunciation and grammar that's capable of conveying complex logic and reasoning. Research in New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Florida, Chicago, Texas, Los Angeles, San Francisco shows a remarkably uniform grammar spoken by African Americans who live and work primarily with other African Americans. Repeated studies by teams of black and white researchers show that about 60% of the African American residents of the inner city speak this dialect in its purest form at home and with intimate friends. Passive exposure to standard English through the mass media or in school has little effect upon the home language of children from highly segregated inner city areas. However, those African Americans who have had extensive face-to-face dealings with speakers of other dialects show a marked modification of their grammar. In the first 2 decades of research, linguists were divided in their views of the origin of African American English, whether it was a southern regional dialect descended from non-standard English and Irish dialects, or the descendant of a Creole grammar similar to that spoken in the Caribbean. By 1980, a consensus seemed to have been reached as expressed in the verdict of Judge Charles Joyner in the King trial in Ann Arbor, which you mentioned and I testified in myself. This variety of language showed the influence of the entire history of the African American people from slavery to modern times and was gradually converging with other dialects. However, research in the years that followed found that in many of its important features, African American vernacular English is becoming not less, but more different from other dialects. Research on the language of ex-slaves showed that some of the most prominent features of the modern dialect were not present in the 19th century. It appears that the present-day form of African American English is not the inheritance of the period of slavery, but the creation of the second half of the 20th century as the result of increasing residential segregation. An important aspect of the current situation is a strong social reaction against suggestions that the home language of African American children be used in the first steps of learning to read and write. Now, the Oakland controversy is the fourth major reaction that I know of to proposals of this kind. Plans for programs to make the transition to standard English have been misunderstood as plans to teach the children to speak African American English, or Ebonics, and to prevent them from learning standard English. As a result, only one such program has been thoroughly tested in the schools, and even that program, though very successful in improving reading, was terminated because of objections to the use of any African American English in the classroom. At the heart of the controversy, I think there are two major points of view taken by educators. One is that any recognition of a non-standard language as a legitimate means of expression will only confuse children and reinforce their tendency to use it instead of standard English, a point of view we've just heard. The other is that children learn most rapidly in their home language, and they can benefit in both motivation and achievement by getting a head start in learning to read and write in this way. Both of these views are honestly held and deserve a fair hearing. But until now, only the first has been tried in the American public school system extensively. The essence of the Oakland School Board resolution, as I see it, is that the first method has not succeeded and the second deserves a trial. Research on reading shows that an essential step in learning to read is the mastery of the relation of sound to spelling. As linguists, we know that for most inner-city African-American children, this relation is different and more complicated than for speakers of other dialects. We've not yet been able to apply this knowledge to large-scale programs for the teaching of reading, but we hope that with the interest aroused by the Oakland School Board resolution, this will become possible in the near future. And I've appended an article I wrote last year, published last year, called Can Reading Failure Be Reversed?, which attempts to describe this dialect in more detail and give suggestions for how that knowledge can be used.
Thank you very much, Dr. LeBeau. Turn now to Dr. Robert Williams, Professor Emeritus of Psychology and African American Studies at Washington University in St. Louis. Dr. Williams coined the phrase Ebonics and is the author of several books, including Ebonics, the True Language of Black Folks. Welcome, Dr. Williams. We look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. I'm indeed honored to be invited to this panel this morning. On January 26, 1973, almost 24 years ago, I coined the term Ebonics at a conference that I chaired in St. Louis, Missouri. A group of black scholars and myself argued that we needed to define the language spoken by many blacks rather than let others define it for us. At that conference, I combined two terms, ebony, meaning black, and phonics, meaning the science of speech sounds, to form the term Ebonics. In 1975, I published this book entitled Ebonics, the True Language of Black Folks. Now, Ebonics has two major dimensions as a language. One, a lexicon, or the vocabulary of the language, and two, morphology, or the study of the structure and form of the language that include its grammatical rules. Ebonics may be defined as the linguistic and paralinguistic features which on a concentric continuum represent the communicative competence of the West African, Caribbean, and United States slave descendant of African origin. It includes the grammar, various idioms, patois, argots, idiolects, and social dialects of black people. Now, we certainly all agree that standard English is the lingua franca, or the common language spoken by the people of the United States of America. It is certainly the language of the business, commerce, and industrial world. Our goal is to develop methods that will enable African American children to master standard English. I think the basic question that concerns us is, what are the best methods for achieving this goal? To answer this question, I will discuss a brief personal history and 3 pieces of research that strongly support the use of Ebonics as a legitimate approach to teaching standard English and reading. In Little Rock High School, I tested in the low average intelligence range by earning an IQ of 82. I barely missed being placed in the special education classes by 3 IQ points. My counselor placed me in a vocational trade curriculum because she said I did not have college ability. She told me that I did not talk right and that I did not have college ability. She told me that my grammar was poor. I spoke Ebonics. Through a fluke, however, I went to a junior college and then on to Philander Smith College, a small historically black college in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was there that I learned the rules of standard English from an English teacher and a French instructor. I graduated with honors in 1953. Cum laude, laude, and thank you, laude. I went on to Wayne State University and received a master's in psychology in 1955. In 1961, I earned a doctorate in clinical psychology at Washington University, St. Louis, Missouri. I was a full professor for 22 years before retiring in 1992. The first study is one that I conducted in 1970 that led me in the direction of the Ebonics hypothesis. I developed the Black Intelligence Test of Cultural Homogeneity to show that African Americans perform better on a test that contained items from their cultural pool rather than from an unfamiliar cultural pool. The results supported my argument. The second study, conducted in 1972, set out to determine the effect of language on test scores of African American children. I switched codes or translated the test items from standard English to Ebonics. This method provided a standard English version of the test and a non-standard version, or Ebonics. 990 kindergarten, first grade, and second grade children were included in the study. The results were striking. The children scored significantly higher on the Ebonics version than on the standard English version. The following 2 examples are given here to show the methods of code switching or translation. Standard English. Mark the toy that is behind the sofa. Ebonics version. Mark the toy that is in back of the couch. 2, standard English version. Point to the squirrel that is beginning to climb the tree. The Ebonics version. Point to the squirrel that is fixing to climb the tree. What I discovered in the first example, the words beginning and sofa were blocking agents. I translated both words to in back of and couch. In the second example, I translated the word beginning to fixing to. These changes produced dramatic changes in the children's test scores. Dr. Gary Simpkins is the author of the third study using Ebonics. His bridge program places emphasis on language skills already in the students' repertoires using material representative of their cultural experiences. Bridge is a reading program in which students proceed from the familiar Ebonics to the less familiar standard English in a series of transitional steps. The Bridge program emphasizes the axiom, start where the child is. Over a 4-month period, the Bridge group showed significantly higher reading achievement test scores than the non-Bridge group. The Bridge group progressed in reading scores by 6.2 months, whereas the non-Bridge group increased only 1.6 months. Teachers who were initially opposed to the Bridge program changed from the negative to positive after using the program. I close, Senator, with these 2 thoughts. 1, you can't appreciate or value what you don't understand, and you cannot understand what you do not know. 2, how do you know where I'm at if you ain't been where I've been? Understand where I'm coming from? Thank you.
Dr. Williams, before going on to Dr. Casserly, do you end up in the same place? That is, if you have the bridge language and you use the Ebonics at the end of the course, do the students communicate in standard English?
Yes, they know that there's home talk and there's school talk, and they learn standard English. I still speak Ebonics. Every day I play golf, we get down.
Well, we'll pick up some more questions after you hear from Dr. Casserly. Dr. Michael Casserly is the Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools, the national organization that exclusively represents large urban public districts. For nearly 20 years, Dr. Casserly has dedicated his career to improving the education of the nation's 5.8 million inner-city school children. Dr. Casserly, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to associate myself, first of all, with the serious academic work that the gentlemen on this panel have done, and I congratulate them on their statement. I am Michael Casserly. I'm Executive Director of the Council of the Great City Schools, a coalition of the nation's largest urban school systems, and I'm pleased to testify before this critical subcommittee this morning. I'd like to devote my brief comments this morning to the achievement of African American and other children in urban schools nationally. I hope this will give additional context to the issues being discussed here this morning. But before I do want to publicly acknowledge and applaud your leadership and advocacy last fall for increasing federal Title I appropriations and the appropriations for the Individuals with Disability Act and other programs. We will do everything in our power to make sure that those additional appropriations in elementary and secondary education are spent effectively. In preparation for this hearing, the Council of the Great City Schools conducted a brief survey of its membership asking for information on the use of programs such as the one in Oakland. We received survey returns from some 25 or so major urban school districts across the country. So far, about 23 urban public school systems across the country have indicated that they do not use an approach similar to the Oakland approach as a formal policy or program district-wide. Several urban public school systems, however, do use such an approach similar to Oakland. One is San Diego and one is Los Angeles, as you have heard. San Diego has a program called the Mainstream Academic English Program that provides professional development for teachers to help African American and English-speaking Latino students achieve mastery in standard English. The program is used in 16 of the district's approximately 150 schools and with some 43 of the district's 5,300 teachers. Los Angeles has a program called the Language Development Program for African American students. Its focus is on professional development of teachers and staff. The program is used in approximately 31 of the district's some 775 schools. Evaluations of all of these programs, including the one in Oakland, indicate higher achievement scores in all three cases. A number of other urban school districts across California use a similar approach, partially in response to the California Standard English Proficiency Program, as you heard from Carolyn Getridge. Schools in Chicago and Dallas have also used the same approach in the past. Most urban public school systems across the country do not have a formalized policy or program similar to Oakland's, however. Several districts, however, do offer workshops to teachers and staff on how to improve proficiency in standard English for African American students, and we assume that some teachers use these approaches on an ad hoc basis in their classrooms. Each of these programs, whether formal or informal, have a number of things in common. One, they work to improve the ability of students to speak standard English. Two, they do not attempt to teach students how to speak or improve their proficiency in Ebonics. Three, they attempt to improve proficiency in standard English by respecting the language that students bring to school rather than characterizing it as a deficit. And four, they provide techniques for students and staff in helping students move from one dialect to standard English. The main challenge that programs such as the one in Oakland, Los Angeles, and San Diego try to address involves the achievement levels of African American and other students. The goal is to teach children to world-class standards in the core subjects and to prepare them for the workplace and for full participation in democracy and the economy. So far, the nation's schools have had a fairly mixed track record in the achievement of African American students, particularly in the inner cities. We have good news in terms of the gaps being closed over a 20 to 25-year period for African American students, but if you were to take a snapshot of the achievement of African American students, particularly in urban school districts, you'll still find them considerably further behind many other students. And it's programs like the one in Oakland and in San Diego and Los Angeles that are attempting to address these achievement gaps. And I have attached data from a variety of studies throughout the country. The federal government has an important role, in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, to play that is entirely consistent with the historic mission in education of improving opportunity. Within its current authorizations, Congress could insist on targeting more of the federal Goals 2000 money on urban schools. It could pump more money into the Title I concentration program. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest that one thing that Congress and the federal government resist doing. I hope that political leaders everywhere will resist turning issues raised by the Oakland schools into political rhetoric. There is a disquieting rush to judgment on this issue when the issue reached national visibility. The issue has the potential to divide us. This debate should not be about good versus bad, low versus high, excellent versus superior. It should be about how it is we move our urban school systems and the achievement of African American students in our urban centers to excellence. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate the time this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Casterly. The testimony which this panel has given is obviously very erudite and very complicated. Dr. LeBeau, you, I think, crystallize it when you say that the two major points of view are, one, any recognition of a non-standard language as a legitimate means of expression will only confuse children and tend to reinforce their use of it instead of English. And the other is that children learn most rapidly in their home language. Where do you come out on it, Dr. LeBeau? You have recited your statistics, but I don't sense a conclusion in your testimony.
I myself am not an educator, but the results of research on effective teaching throughout the world come down on the second side. Some of the most effective work has been done by the psychologists testing the immersion programs in Canada and examining second language learning programs throughout the world. Wallace Lambert, in particular, has shown that whether we're dealing with the French learning English in Maine or Latino speakers learning English, that reinforcing the home language in the first stages and respecting it leads to more rapid advance in both languages. So that the consensus of research is that the children do learn most rapidly when they're given when the teaching proceeds on the basis of what they know when they come to school. A point of view that's been expressed a number of times here.
Well, I can see that they would learn most rapidly if you use the language that they have used before coming to school, but that raises the question as to whether that is the best way to get them to use standard English. Dr. Williams, I am impressed by your definition. The concentric continuum represents the communicative competence, etc. That would challenge Dr. Henry Higgins for where the rain is mainly, as I read it. And I am obviously impressed by your achievements. And when you talk about using the second language, I can understand how you can handle it on the golf course and handle a different form of speech and maybe interchange them in the Senate hearing room. But how about the students in school? Are they able to handle the use of Ebonics interchangeably with the use of standard English and still keep up?
One thing that I think that we all must understand is that African Americans are very creative and very flexible. They're able to code switch very easily. They can translate if they're taught how to do this, what the equivalents are. For example, in the studies that we've done, the children already have information into their repertoire of experience. But if you're asking them questions which do not match up with what they have, then they don't really understand what you're saying. Code switching is very easy to do, or translating what is being said into another language.
Well, I can see that if you're asking somebody a question and the use of the word fixing is the one they understand as contrasted with another, that you ask them a question in a language that they can understand so they can give you an answer that is competent. But how long do you use that their starting language, and how fast do you change it over into standard English so that they use standard English?
I think as soon as they enter kindergarten or wherever they enter the school and they're using non-standard English or Ebonics, you teach them how to translate by simply presenting to them the model language, and the children quickly pick that up. You don't teach them Ebonics. They already have mastered Ebonics.
Dr. Casterly, I focused on your testimony about attempting to improve proficiency by respecting their Ebonics language rather than by characterizing it solely as deficits. But do you share Dr. Williams' sense that these students at these tender ages, without Dr. Williams' IQ, can move back and forth? You said it was tested at 82, only 3 points above the other category. I'm not going to ask you, it's been retested after that. Dr. Casterly, do you share Dr. Williams' view that these students can move back and forth?
Well, first of all, I'm not an instructional expert like most of the panel is here. I generally think that Dr. Williams is probably correct about the necessary code switching that goes on, but this is one of those areas where I think it's important to leave instructional approaches like this to local school and instructional officials who can make an adequate judgment about the instructional needs of the individual student.
Dr. Taylor, by the time the students reach your level as Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, this problem is all behind them?
I think that we find that the issue of competence in standard English is seen throughout the entire educational system. From time to time, you see students graduating from high schools in our country who go on to college, who might have mastered the academic content of subject areas, but who still need support to enhance their language skills. We have in some of the legislation already special services for student special services in the TRIO program, Title IV. And these programs often provide tutorial support for students who need further enhancement in the acquisition of standard English. Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, if I might, with regard to really trying to determine which teaching strategies are most effective. Dr. Casterly pointed out that there were a number of school districts that are engaged in rather ad hoc sort of arrangements with regard to examining these approaches. We need an opportunity and some encouragement and some incentives to systematically examine other approaches to teaching standard English to all of our students at all levels of the educational system. We need more support for researchers and scholars who can really come back to us with data which would inform us on the strategies that are most effective in doing this. Right now, we are operating somewhat in an environment where there is speculation and hypothesis making. We need to have more definitive information.
Dr. Casterly.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to agree with that wholeheartedly. In the current climate, with the current polemics, it's very hard to do very systematic studies, but it's absolutely necessary to do that. So far, I think you really can't answer the question, what is the best? We do know that the approach that Oakland is using is raising the achievement scores of African American students in that school. What we have not done is a whole lot of serious academic comparisons about what the best way is to do that.
Dr. Williams?
Yes, I'd like to make what I think is one significant correction. It's been stated that using Ebonics as a transitional method is teaching down to students. I don't think that it's teaching down to students. It's simply matching the teaching method to where the student is so that that student can make a connection and move on to another level. If you don't connect with the student is left behind and the teacher's moving on, leaving the student back there. So it's not teaching down, it's really plugging into where the student is and making a connection with that student in order to lead the student on.
Dr. LeBeau.
To connect with what Dr. Cassidy was saying, I'm a member of a committee of the National Research Council putting together a report on the prevention of reading difficulties among young children. My colleagues who are psychologists and experts in reading have asked me, what's the scientific evidence for the cultural effect on reading? And my answer so far has been that we don't have the kind of evidence that would be comparable to the massive studies of the Head Start and early intervention programs for the reasons that we've seen here. The strong emotional reactions against the introduction or even the tolerance of the language of the children have terminated the testing of programs and interfered with the knowledge we'd like to have. So one result I feel of this controversy is that people will see the need for us to pursue these alternatives and develop that kind of information.
Well, thank you very much. I think there is a large body of agreement coming out of the hearing today as I hear it. No doubt about everybody's objective to see to it that the students are educated in the best way possible so they can compete in America and compete in the world. And that the end product, we want to have students who understand standard English and who speak standard English. And the issue is in some stage of difference of opinion as to whether it is a bridge that is helpful or whether it is a distraction. But I would commend the written statements of this panel to those who focus on this issue, because it takes a lot more analysis and a lot more reflective thought than you can get it by just hearing it once or by having the questions raised. And I thank you, Dr. Casterly, for your compliment about the funding which we have made out of this committee. We consider it very, very important, and there's a real battle among the priorities which we have on the $1.6 trillion. And our subcommittee has fought hard to make education a very, very high priority, to see to it that these funds are available. And basically, we prevailed last year. It was a real battle.
Thank you.
The statements for the record have been submitted by Reverend Jesse Jackson, who wanted to be here, but his plane hasn't arrived by the end of the hearing, and by the Honorable Ronald Dellums from the House of Representatives. I think it's been a very constructive hearing, and we will digest this record to decide what to do further on the subject. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last week, the Oakland School Board revised its resolution on Ebonics to make clear that students will be taught no language except standard English. Tomorrow morning, on our companion network, C-SPAN 2, see remarks by the Chief of the British Defense Staff on the United Kingdom's perspective on NATO expansion. Live coverage begins at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Later at 1:30 p.m., also on C-SPAN 2,